Hey there, welcome back. In this lesson, I want to talk about something new. I guess everything could be considered new, but we're going to talk about ES6 variables and the difference between const, var, and let. So what I'm saying here is const, let, and var. And you see how my editor, Sublime, automatically highlights these words. So what is a const? What is a let? And you already know what a var is. So a variable, well, that's just a local variable. Cool. But let's talk about const and let and what the differences are. So a const is a constant. It is a variable, I suppose, in a sense, that will never be reassigned. So what happens when I say const name is equal to Caleb and console.log name? I open this up on my browser in the console, hit the old refresh button, and I get my name, just like a regular variable. Cool. What happens when I go to reassign it? Name is not Caleb. I get an error. I get a type error. Assignment to constant variable. It sounds a little bit like an oxymoron, but what this is saying is you cannot reassign this. What happens if we try this? I'm not going to rewrite all that. Let's just move that down. Catch error console.log error.message. So remove that. And so when I run this, it's going to give me an error. It's a try catch. Remember, it catches errors. Refresh, and here it is. Here's the error. I could even alert the error if I wanted to. Assignment to constant variable. So that's giving us a problem. Now, what does const mean? It means when you set a variable, it will never, ever be changed. Now, when are you going to use that? The domain that you're on, for example. If you're trying to get the domain, whatever, website.com or facebook.com or wherever the JavaScript is running, you might not ever want to change that because the JavaScript is not meant to run on another website. Your JavaScript is meant to run on your own website. Now, the difference here between const and let is a variable that you can reassign over and over again. Let name is equal to Caleb. Let name, oh no, just name, just overwrite it. It's already been declared. And I put not Caleb. The only thing I did here, different from before, was I changed const to the word let. Refresh. And the browser doesn't scream at me at all because that's acceptable. Now, if I can rewrite let and I can rewrite var or overwrite var, why the heck would I use let instead of var? Well, great question. And this really comes down to scope. Remember how scope is your access to variables? Well, just like when we write a function and we have just like this, variable name, right? What about in an if-else statement? For example, let's do var name. No, let's not do a var. Const name is Caleb because my name's never going to change. If name is equal to Caleb, awesome, right? Do something. Otherwise, do something else. Well, we're not going to run with this code because, well, we're not focusing on that right now. The name is Caleb, so this is going to run now. What if I wrote let brother's name is equal to Nathan. And I said console.log brother's name. Actually, I want that up one. Run this script, and theoretically, everything will work perfectly. Just like that. Cool. Okay, so why the heck am I using let instead of var? Well, watch this. Console.log, and I type in brother's name. What do you think this is going to give me? Reference error. Brother's name is not defined. JavaScript does not know that this variable exists. Now, why the heck is that? The variable is there. It's only in an if-else statement, so why does it not exist? Here is the answer. is const and let have a different type of scope, and the scope is these brackets. It doesn't matter what the brackets are from, it's just the brackets. So whether that's in a function or a method or an object somewhere or an anonymous function or an if-else statement or a for loop, this will never break outside of the curly brackets. Now, what about const? What if I add another one in here? Does const do the same thing? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, const is constant. It's supposed to be basically the same value across the entire script. So if we say const, well, I mean, technically brother's name should be constant, so that's never going to change. But let's say const pets is going to be, how many pets do I have? 2. I have 2 cats. Now I go in here and I type const console log.pets. I'm also going to do it here. And just to show you, let's do pets line 1, and let's do pets line 2. Save, refresh, and there we go. We have pets 1. It shows my value of 2. There it is. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. But pets 2 doesn't run. In fact, it gives me an error. It says JavaScript line 13. Huh. Look at that. Pets is also not defined. So const is also bound to its brackets. And we're not talking about the if-else statement. We're just talking about this. Now, what if you wanted to use a const or a let outside of an if-else statement? Well, we've already done that. Here we have const is equal to name, and it's outside of this, and it works. And how do I know that it works? Console.log name. I'm going to remove the other one to reduce confusion. There we go. We have it. If I want to see if it works inside there, I'm going to just move this in here, indent that for clarity. It still works. So do you remember the concept of closure? Of how you can have a variable outside of a function, but inside of that function it can use a global variable, but a local variable inside of a function cannot break outside of its function walls? It's the exact same concept. So what happens when we write a loop? For variable I is equal to 0, I is less than or equal to 10, I++, and we do console.log I. Well, we don't want this var to break out of this. It doesn't need to. It has a temporary use, and that temporary use starts and ends with these curly brackets. So why are we using var at all? Why not use let? Let is reassignable, remember? So if I save and I show you, it works perfectly. Now don't confuse that with const, because this I variable is going to be reassigned. It starts off at 0 and then goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Const is not rewritable. And so this will throw us an error. Here we go. It showed us 0, but assignment to constant variable gave us a type error. Why is that? Why did it throw a 0? Well, because it's assigned here. And so that first iteration in the loop works perfectly. It's fine because it has not been reassigned. The second iteration, the time that the loop comes around and that I turns into the number 1, it's reassigned and all of a sudden throws you an error. So if we broke out of this loop after the very first iteration, it works. So that's the difference between var, let, and const. So in summary, const never changes. That's not how you spell it. Never changes. And let is reassignable. Now, both of these are scoped to the closest curly brackets. So these are scoped to the closest curly brackets. Whereas var is not. var is not restrained to those. And to give another example, actually let's just undo. No need to write when it's in my history. There we go. What if I wrote var, brother's name, and down here, console.log, brother's name. All I did was basically go back to the code that we had written before we looked at a different example. So I'm going to look at the console name here and here. Get rid of that, it's unnecessary. So var brother's name is being assigned inside of an if statement. And we're going to console log that. That's going to work perfectly fine. We know that. We've experienced that a million times by now. But outside of that if statement, outside of where it was defined, what is it going to be? Is it going to be undefined? Of course not. It's not undefined because var is not bound. It is not scoped to its curly brackets. var has different scoping rules. For example, var is scoped to a function, but var in general moves up. Now, we need to talk about hoisting. We talked about hoisting before with var and how it doesn't matter where you use the keyword var, it goes up to the top of its scope. So if we have a function, I'm just going to delete all this, it's no longer necessary. If we have a function name, and we put var name, this will work because remember the rule of hoisting. It moves up to the very top. So even if you write it down here, JavaScript looks at that and says, oh, I know that you actually meant to declare it at the top. So as a developer, we might as well put it at the top. Does that work with let and const? Well, let's find out. Let's change that to let, and let's just run the function name. Now, if everything runs the way we think it runs, we're going to see in our console the name Caleb. Refresh, name is not defined. Look at that. What about var? Well, that works. What about const? Missing initializer in const declaration. So now we have two errors. Let's go back to let. Let, although can be reassigned, it doesn't seem like it was hoisted to the top of the function, does it? I mean, it's within its curly bracket, so it's within its own scope, but hoisting didn't move it back up to the top. So let was assigned here, and then we can use it anywhere in here. Whatever code we have that uses the variable name let works in here. But const, why did const give us that weird error? Basically, it says that it's missing the const declaration. Well, why is that? Well, we've declared it. And as of right now, if you just declare a variable, what is it? It is undefined. There's nothing in it. Not to be confused with null. Now, when we write it up here, well, we're overwriting it. So that breaks rule number 2 of const. We can't overwrite a const. So why is it complaining about a missing declaration? Well, because it needs to be assigned immediately. Const is immediately assigned and never changed. That's it. Game over. End of story. So I could say const, don't even need that there. Just say const name. There we go. It works. So that's the difference between var, let, and const. What you need to know is let and const are ES6 variables. That means not all browsers will support them. So if you're creating an application that has to run on, God forbid, Internet Explorer 6, 7, 8, or 9, or I guess even 10, well, let's just say, God forbid your application has to run on Internet Explorer at all. Const and let might throw some errors. JavaScript might not know what to do with it on those older browsers. So if you know you're making an application for corporations that use Internet Explorer, stay away from let and const because they tend to use Internet Explorer and they use old versions of it and they never update their stuff. Older browsers won't support these. And so you need to know your audience. As a developer, it's important you know your audience. If you're making websites for somebody else, who is their audience? Get to know them, try to figure them out. If you are creating a website for a retirement home, well, who looks at retirement homes? Older people, probably people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, looking to put their parents in a safer place, or older people who are realizing that they need a little bit of help being taken care of, right? They probably don't have the most modern browsers versus people who are using Snapchat or Instagram. If you're targeting millennials, for example, we all have the latest browser. So go ahead and use var, let, and const. But just know your target audience. What I would like you to do for your assignment today is, I'm just going to rewind this, is I want you to create a basic script that has const, a var, and a let in it, and I want you to try to access the let outside of the curly brackets.